Planned Parenthood is giving up tens of millions of dollars in federal funding following the implementation of new Title X rules. The nonprofit organization called the new policy unethical and dangerous, adding that more than 1 million of its patients will be put at risk. CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford has the latest from Washington.
Well, Planned Parenthood says that this new rule means that some low-income women who go to their clinics for birth control or other family planning services wouldn't be able to get the discounted rates or would have to go try to find them at other clinics elsewhere. In total, they're turning down about $60 million a year.
We refuse to engage with an administration that is going to force us not to deliver the best possible care to our patients.
Planned Parenthood acting president and CEO Alexis McGill Johnson says her organization was forced out of the Title X funding by the Trump administration. Title X subsidizes family planning services for some 4 million women nationwide. Planned Parenthood says it has served about 40% of those patients that it says might now have to seek care elsewhere. The president has championed the rule for months with religious conservatives who have pushed for it.
We've issued a final rule to prohibit Title X taxpayer funding from subsidizing the abortion industry.
The impact will mean that people may choose to forego care. They may choose to delay their care until this is resolved, and that's what's unacceptable.
By law, the federal money could never be used to perform abortions. But under the new rule, clinics that receive money under Title X programs can no longer refer patients for abortions. The rule is almost identical to one issued by the Reagan administration and upheld in 1991 by the Supreme Court, but was reversed by President Bill Clinton in 1993.
Well, the reality is Planned Parenthood for years has been abusing Title X as a marketing slush fund. Women come into Planned Parenthood for birth control services, and then they're sold their abortion services.
Kristen Hawkins is president of Students for Life and advocated for the new Title X rule.
Women are still going to receive the same amount of access and care. They're just not going to be able to go to a Planned Parenthood, and they're not going to be receiving Title X funds for that.
Now, a federal appeals court in San Francisco is considering whether or not to overturn this new rule, and Planned Parenthood also is taking the fight to Congress and try to get legislation that would protect this funding. Meanwhile, the Trump administration says there are other organizations that can provide these services for low-income women.
CBS News reporter Kate Smith is here. She has been covering this story extensively. Kate, thank you for being here. How could this decision impact the patients?
That's a great question. And what we're hearing from Planned Parenthood is this could impact patients in two ways. By increased wait times, because they're operating on a smaller budget, so it would be harder to fulfill those appointments. And then second, the services that they're coming in for, and really specific services, so say a pack of birth control pills or an IUD, those things would become more expensive for patients because they're no longer being subsidized by those Title X funds. So we're seeing it in two different ways: a delay of services and then an increase of costs.
How does this change then affect the way that Planned Parenthood operates?
That's another great question. It's one that we haven't had a lot of clarity on. So the way Title X works is that individual grants are rewarded to organizations like Planned Parenthood and many others as well. And they're for very specific projects. So, for example, Planned Parenthood has one project where they have a mobile medical unit in Cleveland. And they go around to homeless areas and they help women with pregnancy tests, birth control, IUDs, things like that. Now, that was a very specific Title X grant. So now that they're not able to use those funds, they're no longer able to do that specific program. So what you're going to see are programs like that having to sunset because, of course, the money has run out. Unfortunately, Planned Parenthood hasn't given us a clear idea of how much money is at stake. We've heard it's around the ballpark of $60 million, but Planned Parenthood won't confirm that. They're really trying to focus this all on the programming that will have to be shut down.
That's interesting for you to say. So $60 million is the amount that they would be foregoing, or altogether their operating costs?
No, that would be the money that they're foregoing because they are no longer choosing to participate in the Title X program.
Okay, so they will still be able to have operations discussions that are underway, but how could this impact the discounted drug plan?
So that's another great question. So we spoke to some people within the federal government yesterday, and their understanding is that it might actually impact, because they're no longer in Title 10, it could impact their ability to get discounted drugs, which was a federal program that you could have access through Title 10. So birth control, IUDs, these are medicines that are actually very, very expensive, especially if you're uninsured women. And so this program, the idea was that not only can you get a grant from the federal government through Title 10, you're also granted access through discounted drugs. And so the idea is we have to confirm this, but we believe that if you're not part of Title 10, you will no longer have access to subsidized birth control options as well. So it's kind of a double hit if you'll think about it that way.
And I think it's interesting to note too that Planned Parenthood actually refused the funding. It wasn't that the federal government wasn't going to be giving them the funds. Explain the restrictions in abortions and even the doctor-patient privilege that they felt was restricted in order for them to make this decision.
That's an important point to make here. Planned Parenthood has been saying that they have been forced out of the program, but the reality is that they have chosen not to participate in the program any longer. And again, in Crawford's piece, the way she says it, it's because they believe that the new rules are unethical. So what happens under Title 10, these new rules, are that doctors within Planned Parenthood are no longer allowed to refer patients to abortion. So imagine it this pragmatically. So you're a woman, you walk into Planned Parenthood, you think you might be pregnant, but you also want to get a birth control option. Many, many women who go into Planned Parenthood will also receive some sort of birth control at the time of their abortion appointment. So you go in, you find out you're pregnant. Under Title 10, you would no longer allowed to refer a patient to abortion. So if you are a woman coming into a Planned Parenthood, that doctor would not be allowed to tell you that Planned Parenthood can do an abortion, go to the front desk, and we can schedule that if that is your choice. And that is what Planned Parenthood is objected to. They are saying that if a woman is coming to our clinic, we want to give them the full spectrum of the options that they have. And right now, abortion is legal, and that is an option that women have. And if we're not allowed to say that, we're not allowed to help women with one of the options through a pregnancy, we can't, in good faith, accept these funds any longer.
These changes may actually be temporary. I think it's also important to note that there's some lawsuits going on. So explain how that could all unfold in the courts.
That's right. So there are two different ways that these Title 10 rules may not actually be the permanent change to Title 10 funding. There are two ways that could happen. One is through the courts, like you mentioned. So Planned Parenthood has obviously sued over these rule changes. And in certain, federal district courts, judges have agreed with Planned Parenthood. They've said, this is illegal. It would, be in violation of George H.W. Bush's, reversal of the Reagan rule, back in the 80s. And so they have sided with Planned Parenthood. However, they have not given them a preliminary injunction. So they're saying we're going to hear the case, but in the interim, we have to abide by the rules for now. So that is one way. So if a court ultimately sides with Planned Parenthood on this, then that is one way that these Title 10 rules could be reversed. Another way is actually through Congress. So right now, House Democrats have put forward a spending bill that effectively would reverse all these rule changes for Title 10. It passed the House. It's now in the Senate. So Planned Parenthood is really looking to, Senate Democrats and, Republicans who are, in favor of Planned Parenthood and abortion rights to pass this spending bill that would effectively reverse all of these changes that you're seeing to Title 10 and, what we're talking about, this, so-called gag rule.
We're running out of time, but I think it's really important to know for people that are in a low-income situation, where can they go now to get medical attention?
So you still can go to Planned Parenthood.
Okay.
We're not, you're not going to see these changes happening immediately. They are tapping into emergency funds. They're tapping into individual, philanthropists to try to make up that budget shortfall. But the other thing to note is that Planned Parenthood only makes up 40% of Title 10 recipients. There are plenty of other services and organizations that are still receiving these funds and they are abiding by these rules. So while your experience at these organizations may be different because they are abiding by the rules, you still would be able to get birth control at a subsidized rate there.
Great. Kate Smith, thank you so much for your insight. 3 new